Hello everyone, and welcome to our final session in our January Health Reset event series. My name is Laura Ives and I'm the Digital Health Editor at the Telegraph. I'm really looking forward to this 45-minute session because this evening we're focusing on happiness, the happiness reset, something I think we could all use a bit more of in these difficult times. So I'm really excited to have two marvellous and eminent guests this evening who I'd like to introduce to you. And first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Linda Blair. Linda Blair is a chartered clinical psychologist, an associate fellow of the British Psychological Society and a registered practitioner with the Health and Care Professions Council. We've come to rely on Linda at the Telegraph for her brilliant weekly advice columns called Mind Healing, and more recently for her daily dose tips, which she offers every day. And she's also the author of 5 books on parenting and stress management, if that wasn't enough. Welcome, Linda, and thanks very much for being with us this evening.
It's a pleasure to be here. It really is.
Great. And my second guest is Kimberley Wilson. Kimberley is also a chartered psychologist, a visiting lecturer and governor of the Tavistock and Portman NHS Mental Health Trust. But you might know her best as a former finalist on the Great British Bake Off. Kimberley's philosophy of whole body mental health integrates nutrition, lifestyle and psychological therapy. And she also runs her own podcast called Stronger Minds. Last year, she released a fascinating book called How to Build a Healthy Brain, and I'm looking forward to her telling us a lot more about that. Welcome, Kimberley. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I think it's going to be a good session.
Yes. So happiness, I mean, it's clearly an issue right now. We're in the midst of a pandemic. It's January. The weather is dark and gloomy. It's cold. And I suppose I wanted to start the session by asking you both, you know, how you feel about what we're going through at the moment. What have you noticed amongst the people, the clients, how they're coping with what's going on? How do you think, what do you think people are struggling with most? Maybe to kick off, Kimberley, if that's okay.
I think there's been a shift in the way that people have been dealing with the pandemic as we've gone along. So right at the beginnings of March last year, March and April, it was a lot about adjusting. There's huge adjustment issues and uncertainty. Suddenly the entire world has been turned upside down. All of the things that you thought you could rely on, the things that you were looking forward to, really the power that you thought you had, the control that you thought you had in your own life was gone very, very quickly. And so there was a way in which I think people had to really readjust and reassess what it meant to be kind of living in the world and adjusting not just to the changes, but also to this kind of ongoing chronic state of threat that we were thrust into. Now, what I'm seeing, and I think this is partly due to being in the winter and partly due to going back into lockdown, is really the drudgery of it. So people just feeling exhausted, tired, very bored. There feels like less to look forward to. And also, you know, when we were thinking at Christmas, oh, it'll be better, and then it wasn't. So there's a kind of a mistrust of hope, perhaps, and people are being kind of very cautious about hoping. And I think that's the thing that I think psychologists and mental health are thinking about, which is holding on to a reasonable sense of hope, but also helping people to endure. I think at the moment, we've done the adjustment and now it's much more about endurance, I think, for the next few months.
Yeah, I find that really interesting what you say about endurance. I mean, how do you think we can get that? How can we endure without sort of falling into a sort of pit of despair and hopelessness?
I think it's going to be a lot of things. It's certainly lots of things that we'll get into. I know Linda's got a lot of information and ideas on this. It's going to be a mixture of things. It's going to be a mixture of the taking physiological care of yourself, the self-care stuff, making sure that literally your body is in a state in which it can endure, can be kind of stress resilient, but also about the psychological interventions, being realistically optimistic, not making too many big, setting up big expectations for yourself, not setting dates in stone when you think this is all going to be over, just being, I think, realistic, optimistic, optimism is going to be one of the skills that's going to be really important for people.
Yes, that's interesting. I mean, I know, Linda, that when we talk about this before, you talked to me a bit about a recipe for happiness or endurance. I mean, is that something? Do you have a kind of tips in your recipe that would speak to this?
Well, yes, in the sense that what Kimberly just said, that's so true, which is that we all want an answer. You know, what's the thing I can do? But it's not the thing; it's the things, and you have as many. Think of it as a toolkit. Think that you have this toolkit, and you can look in every day and say, you know, I've got all these different tools. Which one is right for today? And they're all practical, smallish things that we can do going. Strangely enough, as a clinical psychologist, I am saying right now, do not spend too much time setting big goals. Emphasize the small things. If you want to dream, do dream. I mean, there's some interesting research in the Netherlands which shows that the best part of a holiday, for example, is planning it. Much better than going on it. So plan a holiday, but don't plan when. That's the sort of thing that you have to be careful of, is setting any. That's what's making us cautious. We don't know, as Kimberly said, we don't trust. So you can do that, but better to think about, look, could I clean the cutlery drawer out and get some organized there today? That's a little bit better.
So in a way, be a little bit more realistic with your plan. Is that what you're saying? Look for things that you know you'll be able to achieve.
I think so, and I also, even if it feels forced, to try and convey some optimism. Real interesting study. I forget the guy's name, but he's French. I remember that. He put pencil in people's mouths in different ways, so that some of them had to smile and some of them couldn't smile, and then he showed them different film clips. And the people that had to smile, even though they hadn't initially had any reason to smile, enjoyed the clips a lot more. So, you know, you can smile and that will make you happy, rather than wait till you're happy and then smile. So that's one real important thing that you can do that I think helps. Another thing is, at the end of the day, to write down, you can do a gratitude journal, but that's a bit of a cliche nowadays. Maybe just write down one or two things that happened today that brought a smile to your face before you thought about it, or that made you feel good. Tiny little things, like making a better cup of tea than you normally do, or your little child bringing you something. It doesn't matter. But journaling positive things has the most profound effect, not just on our happiness, but actually on our physical health. A study in Kentucky, of all places, Kentucky, on some nuns. They looked at the nuns 2 years old, and they were looking at them now when they were in their 80s and 90s and seeing which ones were left. And the ones whose journals at 22 had more positive terms in them were more likely to be alive. So, I mean, it's absolutely profound.
So what you're suggesting then is really, it's sort of, we should be thinking each day, look, what's something good that's happened today, or something that we can think positively about. And listening to that sort of makes me think, Kimberly, about something I read you said about sort of doing small acts of goodness, you know, even if they're very small. Perhaps you could tell us a bit more about that, because that feels related to that in a way.
Yeah, I think so. There's lots of research around positive psychology and the benefits of things like realistic optimism as one of the tools for psychological resilience. And I think sometimes you can get into your own head a little bit, especially if you're feeling low, especially if things are incredibly difficult. And I set a question to my audience on Instagram, and I asked them, you know, there were no limits. If the resources were unlimited, what one good would you like to do in the world? And I was inundated with people saying things like, I would like people to feel safe. I would like to support refugees. I would like to end homelessness. I would like to help with, food poverty. And the first thing when I posted these answers was how many people were simply reassured to see that despite everything that's happening and how dark things feel, there are so many people invested in the goodness of each other. It was just really reassuring and really heartwarming. And then the second thing that I recommended was that, okay, we're not in the situation to be able to do these grand goals. We can't click our fingers and end homelessness, but you do have an opportunity to do something small. Can you donate to a homeless charity? Can you put together a box of, a woolly hat and some socks and some scarves and donate that to a hostel? That these things are taking you towards a bigger goal, a bigger ideal. Also reminds you of your agency. I do have some control in this situation. I'm not completely helpless. And it reminds you of what you do have, because if you're in a position to give, it means you are recognizing what you have, not completely depleted. Yeah. You have something, you giving puts you in the state of recognizing what is abundant in your life, and that can shift your psychological state. That can just make you feel a little bit better. So these tiny acts, a pound given to a breakfast club, can, and with that pound you've fed 3 children. That's a good thing to do, and to feel good about.
Yeah, I think that's that idea of control I find, really interesting, because as you say, that's sort of what we've all lost, isn't it? Control. But I'll just like to bring in a question from the audience now. Dorry has asked, which I'll put to you first, Linda. How do you manage grief when the usual coping mechanisms are not there? I don't know what usual coping mechanisms they're referring to, but anyway, I'll leave that with you and see where you go with it.
I would imagine the usual coping mechanisms would be your vicar or your confidant that usually you can be supported by. They're still there, but not in the same way, because you can't their arms and have a good sob with them really there. I think we can never manage grief. I don't think this is any different, except that we're all suffering grief because everybody has lost something. We haven't necessarily lost someone, but we've lost a year of the way we thought it was going to be. And so we're all grieving. The only way to manage grief is to get through each day until it doesn't hurt so much. And I wish I could say to you, there is a pill you can take. There is someone you can call. Grief is the one thing in our lives that we do survive. We do survive it, but that we need one thing only, and that is time. So be yourself. It will work itself through. It doesn't pass. You will always remember whatever it is you lost, and you will always care, and you will sometimes still cry. It will get easier, and you will be richer for whatever it is they left behind that is a part of them, that is in your heart and your memory.
That's lovely, Linda. I don't know, do you have anything you want to add, Kimberley, there?
Not really. I would say, because the thing about grief is that it comes in waves. I think sometimes people think I've done a big chunk of it and I came out the other end, and that's it. I've done the grieving part. But grief can come in waves. And when I'm talking to people about grief, I say that it's like being in a lagoon with some islands, and when you're in the lagoon and you're wading through, that's your grief. And then sometimes you have these moments of relief when you're on a little island, and that can feel good. And those can be, spending time with friends, laughing, reminiscing about things that you really enjoyed. And then sometimes you'll find yourself back in the lagoon, and it's just like that. It's kind of in waves, and you'll get better at wading through, and there'll be more islands, and it will feel better, but it comes like this. So go gently.
And I think also your suggestion, Kimberley, about helping other people, if during your own pain, if you can reach out and make somebody pain, whatever it is, doesn't have to be grief, but whatever their problem is, if you can help a little bit, that is almost like putting a soothing balm on your own, just for a little while.
Yeah, that's great. And actually that relates to another question that's just come in, and it's from Bridget, who says, I don't feel bereaved. It's the loss of liberty and spontaneity that I find tough to deal with. And I think that speaks to our new reality, doesn't it? The new life that we're leading, particularly in the sort of third lockdown. So what do we do with those feelings? How do we cope there?
you want to start that one, Kimberly?
Yeah, let's go to you first.
I would put it in the same category. I think it's an existential loss, the loss of liberty, the loss of spontaneity, the loss of control, the loss of the freedom to just get up and pop to the shops when you feel like it, to plan a holiday, to have a wedding, to have your graduation is an existential loss, is a loss of ideals. And I guess it's worth saying there that you can grieve things that haven't happened. We sometimes think, I never had it, so I shouldn't be sad about it. It didn't happen, so it's not really a real loss. But we invest in the future, and we invest in ideals. We invest ourselves emotionally in, say, being able to attend that wedding or looking forward to our graduation. And we have emotional investments in these things. And so I think the first thing is just to recognize it as a loss, and then the kind of same mechanisms for dealing with grief, managing grief, being with grief, bearing grief, kind of do count, I think.
Yeah. And Linda, is there anything else from your recipe of well-being that you could pull out from that for us?
Well, I think rather just attend to her question, because that's such a darn good question. I would like to give you permission to be annoyed about it or angry about it, because it really doesn't feel fair. And this is, our emotions and our logic kind of stay separate. Our emotions don't very often get logical. They're children. And it's about little kids. When you try to limit a little kid when they want to do something, they absolutely have a tantrum. And I think it's okay to realize that you're angry. Anger covers fear. It is scary. How long is this going to go on? Can I stand it? But actually, if you pay attention to the anger and get yourself a punch bag or shout out the window, I can't stand this anymore, or something that also makes you laugh, which is a great release of tension, it's good. And it will also take away the enormity of your feelings, because they're justified. I don't.
Yeah. And actually, thinking of laughter, I mean, so many of my friends have said to me, I'd like to try and find something funny on TV. I like to have something that's escapism, something that takes me away from the news. And another reader here has just asked, how do we find joy now? So how do we find joy, I wonder, within the limitations that we're all under?
I look at place myself.
It's a tough one, I know.
I look at nature. Everything's starting to poke up through the ground, and that just makes me so joyful, especially if you then smell the smell of spring. Ooh, I love it so much. That's one thing. And the other thing is little kids. I mean, I don't have any little kids right now, and I'm glad I don't, because I really pity people trying to manage them. I'm not romantic, but little kids are so funny, because they haven't learned yet to be polite. They haven't learned to say the right thing. They say the truth, and it's grand. So if you can take a walk, especially somewhere where there's little kids, just watch them, and you'll get lost for a minute. It's good fun.
Yeah. And what about you, Kimberley? What brings you joy?
I want to say one thing, which was, I also, because I have this thing against, I call it toxic positivity, which is this idea, especially if you spend much time on social media and in wellness, which is kind of like good vibes only, hashtag live your best life, as if you're supposed to be, as if it's kind of normal for humans to be manically happy all the time, and that you should always be finding, your bliss or your joy and that sort of thing. And so I just want to say, please do not put yourself under any pressure to feel like you should be happy all the time, or you should be looking for silver linings, or you should be able to, be in this constant state of positivity all the time. It's unrealistic. It's not massively human, and it will just put you under pressure to perform happiness. So I just wanted to kind of flag that. For me, it is comedy, and what I call gentle TV. So TV that isn't even particularly good, but it's just really gentle. And I make sure I watch comedy pretty much every day. I don't watch the news. I get my news either from satirical news shows or from other people, because I think there's a way in which, again, we feel as if we need to be constantly informed. And I think really you end up inundating yourself with more stress, more opinions, more conjecture, more uncertainty, and it's not enormously helpful. So limit the things that take away your joy, like uncertainty and bad news. And certainly I think for me, comedy and humor are really good ways that I'm taking care of myself and trying to find a little bit of joy and levity.
Great. And actually, sorry, Linda, you go.
Just keep an eye out for that word that Kimberly used so well just now, which is should. Whenever you hear yourself saying, I should smile, or I should get out today and do 10 things, that's not about what you want to do. That's about trying to live up to some ideal you have about yourself, or trying to please someone that probably is way from your past that you're never going to please anyway. So, please dump your should and look more for what would I like to do.
And I think that's a really important point, because I think even with all this lockdown, the narrative sometimes has strayed into that should territory. Oh, I've got all this time. I should learn a new language. I should, improve my brain. I should be reading long books. All these things we're supposed to be doing. And it just puts us under even more pressure, doesn't it?
It does.
There's all the January, new you, new diet, new fitness, all of that stuff.
Yeah,
and we'll come on to that in a minute, but I just want to go back to some questions here, because there's a really good question that's come in from Joanne saying, I feel like everyone, all my friends, are doing okay with the lockdown except me. How can I be honest about how I feel?
Oh. Okay, you haven't, I think you probably need to think about who in your life you can really open up to. I would then ask if you could have a word with that person, and I would do it with like we're doing here, face to face. I mean, not really face to face, but you know what I mean. So you can see them and not just hear them, and then admit it, because it sounds like most of the people you're surrounding yourself with, you feel shoulds about, that you need to put on a certain face, and you will have a couple of very close friends in your life. We all do, that we feel we can dump on, maybe a sister or a brother or a friend from high school, whatever, and getting in touch with them, I think, would be a good start. Don't be afraid to admit it, but it's better to do it with someone you can trust, because doing it on, if you haven't done it for a long time, means it's built up, and it will feel overwhelming when you let go. So someone that can help you, just let it finish. It will.
Thank you. Kimberly, do you have anything to add on that one?
I would just say that, and the person did say, I feel like everyone is doing very well. I would just very gently question that assumption. It's a global pandemic. We've never seen anything like this in living history. We're all locked up in our houses. I would challenge anyone to be coping really well. So, and I think, again, what can often happen is that there's a kind of performative happiness or a performative, doing okay. And often what happens in situations like this, which is that, it's the first one to break that gives everybody the permission to say, oh my God, me too. This is the worst. So I would just very gently question that assumption. Even if it's in your own mind, is it true that all of these people are doing great in what feels like the apocalypse? I think it's probably unlikely.
That's really interesting.
You're right about permission, Kimberly, because when someone is real, then you can be real more collectively. And I think if it doesn't mean you have to then stay deep down in misery, it's a bit like washing yourself out, and it's easier to stand back up, actually, rather than wear that burden all the time.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's also sometimes a pressure to put on a happy face and not to seem like you're not coping. And one reader here, Wendy, she says, I think people have always invested in their futures in the past and now. And, we've lived through wars, HIV, and the pandemic is another thing to live through. And she asks, did previous generations do it better? Are our grandparents tougher than we are? Do we need to toughen up?
Wow. I don't think so, because I think what happened in previous generations is that they weren't bombarded by the information every minute of their waking day and every half the night. We've never had so much information overload. And if you can think back before the pandemic, which feels like 1,000 years ago, we were talking about this problem then, that too much information means that we just glaze over and we begin to feel numb. So we had that already. And that's made this pandemic, despite the fact that we've got such amazing breakthroughs in science and medicine, better than ever before, but it's made this one psychologically probably hard.
I mean, is there a sense in which we expect too much from life? I mean, this is what another reader's asking. Do we need to accept that there'll be ups and downs? It's a journey.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And this is what I mean about this kind of toxic positivity, where you're expected, everything's supposed to be fantastic. Also, you're supposed to be hugely productive. You know, everyone's supposed to have a morning routine where they're ticking things off, and they're doing spin classes at 6 a.m. and drinking green juices, and everything is supposed to be this kind of euphoric, hedonistic, fantastic place. There is not a single person who makes it through to adulthood even without experiencing grief, without experiencing loss, without experiencing hardship, whether that is a horrible breakup, whether that is a bereavement, whether that is a separation in the family, whether that is an accident. Not a single person is going to get through a human lifetime without some sort of pain and sometimes suffering. And I think we do just need to be more honest about that. And we need to say that this is the state of being human, and to allow ourselves to feel that and speak about it. You know, that we need to get away from this idea that everything is sunshine and flowers all the time.
Yeah.
And can I add to that? And busy. You pointed out busy. I had a conversation this morning with a journalist where we tried to get hold of each other we kept making appointments to get hold of each other. And finally, one of us just called the other and got them. And we were saying how stupid it is that we're all making all these appointments all the time for phone calls and things like that. And the reason we both agreed is that we don't have enough structure right now, and we're a little bit afraid of these empty diaries. But actually, may I suggest that everybody listening, sometime tomorrow, just rings a friend. Do not send a text to see if it's okay. Just call and see what happens. Maybe not everybody will have a good experience, but I suspect more than 2/3 will. That's for sure. That was so glad. Oh, I'm so glad you just called.
My friend nearly had a heart attack when I called her the other day. She's like, what is this, 1990? Why are we calling each other?
Well, and it goes back to the question of spontaneity, doesn't it? We do need spontaneity. We love spontaneity. It's the heart and soul of creativity. Come on.
Yes, and as you say, spontaneity can mean something really simple, right? Something just, immediate, like a phone call. Yeah. Which is lovely. And I suppose that makes me wonder about, I mean, you've written for the Telegraph, Linda, about the positives we can take from this year and this experience. I mean, I think obviously it's been an awful time for many people. People have lost people. It's been awful grief. But by the same token, I mean, are there things we can take away from this? I mean, for me, like I really haven't missed my commute, and I really enjoyed having a little bit more of that time back for the family. So I think that's what I've found. But I don't know if both of you could speak to that a bit, given that the subject of our talk tonight is happiness. What are the things that have been positive about this year and the new year?
To me, it's the realization for each of us of our resilience. That, this was we didn't even have 24 hours, I don't think. Did we, on the initial shutdown? I don't even think we had 24 hours. Suddenly, out of the blue, life transformed into blackness. And most people managed to get through it one way and another. Not maybe beautifully and not without bruises, but we did it. So first of all, you're more resilient than you know. Secondly, you do know that small things can get you through a day. We used to think, no, I'm just planning for my holiday. When I get to my summer holiday, everything will be okay. Well, no, summer holidays went, so we still got through. So again, and then to me, and most important, because it's the bedrock of what makes us human, other people count more than anything in my life. And now I know it's always going to be worth taking the time to keep in touch
Mhm.
with what really matter to me. It's in our genes. We cannot exist as a species without one another.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? It's really brought that home, I think. I think in a sense, there was almost this feeling that we took social connection for granted because it was just there. And then when it was taken away, certainly I realized the same, that how vital that is for me.
I just listened to a 15-year-old this afternoon who was saying, I used to get so angry when the teachers would take away our social devices, our phones and things, so we had to talk to each other. And now,
yeah,
anything. I just broke my heart, actually.
absolutely. And what about you, Kimberley? What are the positives that you'll take from this whole experience?
I think that they're really largely the same as Linda's. The saying on the bottom of my my website is, "You're stronger than you think, I promise," because we underestimate our resilience, and I think that's my basic philosophy. Personally, slower mornings have been quite nice, actually. Again, I haven't hugely missed my commute, so being able to take mornings a little bit more easily. And also, I've kind of surprised myself in as far as I've always considered myself a bit of a fair weather runner. So the conditions have to be temperate. Basically, it has to be like Disney princess weather conditions for me to go running. But with the gyms closed, I've had to kind of, stop being a big baby and and remind myself that I can run, in the rain and when the weather is a bit cold. So just, again, almost like reminding myself of my own resilience, that I don't need as many comforts as I thought I did.
Yes, and one reader here has mentioned, he's asked, how much is happiness a mindset? Which I think is an interesting question.
100%. The studies are legion to show that there is no correlation between what actually happens to you in life, how many life events you have, how many bereavements you have, how many limbs you have cut off. Doesn't make any difference. What does correlate with longevity, well-being, and life satisfaction is the way you look at what happens to you. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't mean, again, toxic positivity, but it means acceptance where there's pain. It means searching where there seems darkness to find a little chink of light. That's what it means. Mm-hmm. So everything is
absolutely about. And how can you bring that sort of mindset about, do you think, Kimberley?
Well, there are lots of things. There are literally resilience, and I guess I speak more about resilience than I do happiness. It's hard to pin down happiness, and most of the research says the more you try to reach for it and grasp for it, the more elusive it will be for you. But I guess then I'm thinking about what are the attitudes and what are the conditions. So we know, for example, some of them are constitutional. So people who are just constitutionally more laid back, the people who nothing seems to faze, tend to be more resilient to difficulties and stressful things. But then there are things that you can practice. So being part of either a therapeutic group or a religious group, some sort of regular in-person social contact is really, really good for your well-being. Having a valued social role. So for children, it might be your job is to lay the table, or your job is to, and thank you very much for that. Or for adults, anything, whether you find value and meaning in your work, or whether you can find it through other ways, whether it's taking care of your family, or whether it's volunteering, whether you are a volunteer on a helpline, that having a valued social role is one thing. Say again, realistic optimism is one of the other key skills. And there are kind of 10 things, I list them in my book in the chapter on resilience, that there are 10 things, kind of practices that you can do that will help to build this sense of, I can bear it. Because that's the thing that people worry about, is something bad's going to happen to me and I won't be able to bear it. I will collapse. I won't survive. It will be too much. And actually, a life well lived, whether you want to call that happiness or whether you want to call that contentment, is an inner sense, a kind of an inner sturdiness that says, I can bear it. you know, whatever happens, I know I can bear it. And that takes away some of the fear. It doesn't make life easier. It doesn't make you completely invulnerable, but it takes away the panic and the suffering, or at least, you know, greatly reduces it.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. And this is your book about the healthy brain.
Yeah, it's essentially, so I kind of got frustrated with the way that we talk about mental health, because we talk about mental health as though it's completely disembodied from the health of the brain. You know, so we would never talk about asthma. You know, someone goes to their doctor, we would never talk about asthma without saying, you know, this affects your lungs, or, you know, diabetes, this has to do with your pancreas. But somehow we talk about depression, anxiety, all of these things without considering the underlying state of health of the organ that is the sole source of these functions. It doesn't make any sense to me. So in the same way that your pulse rate or your blood pressure are a function of the health of your heart and circulatory system, to a large part, depression, anxiety, the common health conditions, but also things like your risk of Alzheimer's disease, is predicated on the physical health of your brain. And yet, no one gets any instruction on how to take care of their brains at all. Outside of coronavirus times, the leading causes of death in the UK aren't heart disease, they're not cancer, it's dementia.
Right, yes.
And the leading cause of disability around the world isn't HIV, it's not malaria, it's depression. So our leading causes of death and disability are diseases and disorders of the brain, but we're not taught how to take care of our brains. So rather than just shout at the wall, I wrote a book about it. And so
yeah, fascinating. That's fascinating. And I know that you touched on things like nutrition and sleep and exercise, and these are all part of the recipe for brain health, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they really are, because you can have the best therapist in the world, you can have the best interventions, you can have the most well-researched way of approaching things, but if you have a brain that is depleted, that is tired, that is not functioning well, it's just not going to take. The analogy I use is that your interventions are your seeds, but if you throw them onto dry, poorly nourished soil, it's never going to grow, it's never going to take. So we really must start thinking about the health of our brains first. I think we should, again, mental health is the only area of health where we don't think about prevention. You know, children are taught not to smoke, or so that you can reduce your risk of cancer. We're told to exercise to reduce your risk of heart disease. But only in mental health do we say, well, we'll wait until something goes wrong. We'll wait until your first panic attack, or we'll wait until you're depressed, and then we'll try to bring you back to baseline. You know, and there's absolutely no medical reason why we don't approach mental health from a prevention perspective. And I think we're doing that much more. And that's what the book's about. It's about mental health prevention.
Absolutely, it sounds fascinating. So just to go to a couple more readers' questions, then, as I know we're coming towards the end of our session now. But we had one reader who asked about advice for carers, and I know that a lot of people are in a caring situation at the moment. How can a carer stay fit and well, and particularly one with gut problems? Was this particular reader? Linda, do you want to start?
Yeah, the gut is such a sneaky problem, because what distresses your gut usually you don't notice for days, even weeks later. So it's very hard to connect cause and effect with the gut. But a chronic depletion of your own good digestion, because you're so alert, staring at another person trying to take care of them, or not eating the right things, is pretty obvious. So I would say the first thing is practical, is Kimberly's good old practical stuff here, is be aware of your diet. Make sure there's lots of whole grains, lots of healthy kinds of fats, and not sugar. And I'm sure many other things too, lots of water. But the caring thing is really tricky. because we get into a caring mode and we don't like to accept help. I have noticed that when I set up groups like carers for someone living with someone with dementia, you'll say, well, look, we'll get a day sitter so you can have a day off. Oh, I couldn't do that. I couldn't leave them. Yes, you can. It's good for them also to have someone else loving them and caring for them for a little bit of time. We can't do that right now physically, but what you can do is perhaps just like a mother with a small baby, when the person you're caring for is resting or engaged in some way, you could call a friend of yours just to talk about things that you like. Or you could go make yourself something, a little something to eat and drink that's a real treat for you. Something like that. But do make sure that every day there's at least one time when you do some self-care. But right now it is particularly hard. You are absolutely right to ask that question, because we can't have a break. Well, it's the same as parents caring for small children. It's monumentally difficult. When we're through it, the one thing I can say is you're going to be so gosh darn proud of yourself. You will.
Yes, and it goes back to what you were talking about with resilience there, Kimberley. And we had another reader asking about persistent negative thoughts. You know, what can they do to manage persistent negative thoughts? I don't know if you have any ideas on that one.
Well, I think, again, you know, the way that I said that our responses to the lockdown have shifted, I think this persistent negative thoughts, or what we might call rumination, I'm seeing emerge much more. And even in myself, I was thinking the other day that suddenly I was lying in bed and thinking about arguments I'd had 2 years ago. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And so the first thing to say is that this is what your brain does. So please don't blame yourself. Don't think that you're doing anything wrong. This is what your brain does when it's trying to keep you safe. We call it a negative attentional bias. When there's a threat outside or a perceived threat, your brain says, look, right, we need to just stay aware of anything that might be going wrong. And then you end up looking for it. And the more you look for it, the more you'll find it. So it's partly an inbuilt response, not massively helpful now, but it was in our evolutionary past because it's probably what helped you to survive. So first of all, it's very normal, and it's a very normal response to the conditions that we're in at the moment. If you can catch yourself doing it, then just say, okay, time to stop. Let me do something else. You know, take yourself away, maybe watch some gentle TV. I guess it's, just not to, the attitude towards the thoughts can be an additional problem. So try not to see it as a fault in yourself. Everything is really, really hard, and your brain is struggling a little bit.
Yeah.
But your action is really good, because if you say don't think about something, you're thinking about it, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
Don't think about elephants. Where are they? They're all in our minds now. But think about zebras, and you've got the zebras, they blocked out those elephants. And so you need something distracting, but something that's distracting that's interesting to you. So, you know, go knead some bread really hard, or turn on your favorite song and dance, or something that just completely makes it impossible to have that thought at the same time.
So guys, I just want to say we've only got a minute left. So I'm going to ask a very quick final question. It's a really good one, because I know that loads and loads of people are going to be struggling with this particular issue. And the question is, any advice on how to get a good night of sleep?
All right. I'll go as quickly as I can.
Yeah.
So in terms of the practical physiological stuff, light, natural light, like in physical presence of the sky before midday. It's very, very boring. I know you've heard it a billion times before, but so much of your visual system and the way your brain works is predicated on the light that comes really from quite high. Your retinal, the nerves are based at the bottom of your eye that catches this kind of light. So it's at that particular time of day. So if you can, at the very least, open the window and stick your head out, better would be to go for a 10-minute walk as soon as you can when you wake up. It's a really good way of anchoring. Exercise improves the quality of your sleep. So again, if you can go for a walk, see, a walk does it all. It gives you the light, it gives you the movement. Avoiding caffeine after 2 if you're sensitive to it. But the main things that impair our sleep are psychological. The number one treatment for UK and the US for sleep problems is CBT, because it tends to be the things that we're thinking about that keep us awake. So you can use a little worry journal, a little notebook, that if you find it, as soon as you go to bed or you lay your head down, suddenly your mind is churning, write those things down, get them out of your head into a book. And sometimes that can help you to just calm your brain a little bit. But
that's brilliant advice. Thank you. Linda, did you have a quick thing to add?
Take that journal after you've written everything down and get it out of your bedroom. That you want your worries out of your bedroom. That's and the other thing we were talking about, the three of us, why not share a secret before we went on, is that we love online yoga before bedtime. It's so relaxing. If somebody else is telling you what to do and they're telling you to do something that feels great.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, I just want to say a huge thank you, Linda and Kimberley. It's been absolutely fantastic to have you at this event. So many useful tips there. I know that I've got loads of things I'm going to be thinking about and trying tomorrow. And thanks very much to the audience for listening in. Bye.